guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. So, I know I promised that I was going to do a video talking about the Atlas series and that it was going to stand on its own and be full of spoilers and all this stuff. And so I tried twice to film that video. And the first time it was an hour and I couldn't edit it down. It was just like so rambly and I couldn't think of a good way to make it make sense. So I was like, okay, I'll just make an outline of what I want to talk about and I'll try again. And the second time it was 50 minutes long. And it was worse somehow that it was like in being more organized, I left out a bunch of things that I wanted to say. And then I started asking myself, why am I doing this? I think that truthfully, I could not honestly sit here and tell you that I have no idea what the reviews are like because I haven't read them. I haven't sought them out. Like I have always said, I think reviews are a reader space. But of course, I do get tagged in things. And every time a friend of mine, like an author friend, reads the book and they look at the reviews, they text me to be like, are you okay? Like, are you jumping off a cliff right now? Which is pretty dark. So I get the sense that they're bad. And I think that part of what I was trying to do was explain myself, but I kind of had to ask myself, what's the value of explaining my art? I do think that there are many people who take my writing in good faith and just want to know what I was thinking when I was working on it and what that was like as a craft process and are maybe curious about that. But I think that at this point, if I were to address it, it comes off as like almost a desperation to defend myself. And I don't think that's good for the art. I just don't. I think that the Atlas Complex I think I took a lot of swings. I guess I'm proud of myself in some sense that I took risks and they didn't feel like risks at the time because I always knew what I was doing. I always knew what kind of story I was telling. I think I was true to that story. I think I was true to my themes. I think I accurately foreshadowed things as they happened. And that certain characters were doomed by the narrative is less my doing than just the purpose of the narrative and how things had to end. So I don't feel that not that I will never talk about the series in that way, but I don't think that now is the right time to post a video like that. And even there are a couple of things that I do want to talk about that in trying to talk about the book and the series as a whole twice, there were a couple of things I hit on that I do want to bring up. So I'm going to do that, but I will let you know so that you can jump if you haven't read it. I think it's just one of those things where I believe that the art should stand on its own. At the same time, I think it's beneficial when artists talk about their art, but I'm not there yet. I'm not at a place where I want to explain what I've done as if I'm your English teacher. I just don't think that that's conducive to what I was trying to do. I don't think that it's helpful yet. Like maybe this will be different in the future, but anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying I'm not going to do that video right now. But I will talk about the Atlas series. But first, let's see. Do I have any announcements? Okay, so the 12th Night tour has been announced. That is obviously me. I'm going to be going as my alter ego, Alexine Farrell-Fulmouth, and that will be for the book 12th Night, which is a young adult rom-com. The difference between Olivie Blake and Alexine Farrell-Fulmouth is that Olivie Blake only writes for adults and Alexine only writes for teenagers. So in case you were still not clear about that differentiation, it was easier for me to create the Alexine persona. That's my real name, in case you were wondering. Because, I think being a woman and a woman of color who writes in the speculative space, people often make the assumption that I write young adult. And so it was easier for me to be like, every Olivie Blake book is adult fantasy versus every Alexine book is young adult romance. So they're very different. And it will be really interesting, I think, to talk about the way that those books were built and from a craft perspective, how they're different. I'm really excited about the authors I'm talking to. I'm going to be in conversation with Julie Buxbaum in LA. the Barnes & Noble in Dublin, California, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. I am going to my hometown Barnes & Noble for the first time, and I'm going to be talking to Charlie Jane Anders, which is so exciting. Charlie Jane is fantastic. I love all her work. I am a huge fan of All the Birds in the Sky. It's one of those books I love, and I hope we get to talk about sort of like books that defy genre a little bit, as well as her young adult sci-fi series, which was great. Spanish Fork, Utah, I will be talking with Trisha Levenseller. In Austin, Texas, I will be talking to Allie Hazelwood, which is extremely exciting. I love Allie. We've done virtual events together, and we've been at the same cons together, but we've never done we've never been in person talking to each other. So that's going to be great. And then I will be going to Chicago by myself, but you know, you guys really wanted me to go to Chicago. So I'm very excited to be in Chicago. I miss it a lot, and this is a good time of year to be in Chicago. I think we all know that. Then in San Diego, in conversation with Susan Lee. I'm very, very excited. I hope you join me. I have a lot of events also coming up this spring. I think probably the easiest thing is for you to check my website. But May 16th, I will be in Washington, D.C. for the Fantasy Night live at the Library of Congress. I'm really excited. Travis Baldry will be there, and Shauna McGuire, and Roshni Chokshi. I'm just, that's going to be so exciting. I'm actually talking by myself. I'm not on a panel with them. But if you're here, you apparently love listening to me talk to myself, so it's fine. I don't know when this is going to post, maybe today. So if it posts today, then I will be, I have an event tomorrow, with Liz Karen at Skylight Books in LA. I'm doing an event with Katie Robert at the Ripped Bodice on May 13th. I'm doing this all out of order. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I've got an event tomorrow, May 13th with Katie Robert. May 16th, live at the library. I forgot Y'all West. I will be at Y'all West on May 4th. I'm trying to do these things sequentially. And then I'll be on tour. And then June 8th, I'm doing a reading from JANUARIES, which, oh my goodness, I have the ARC and I forgot to bring it here. This is me holding the ARC that's inside. I don't want to show you anything that's inside anyway, but soon we're going to talk about what stories are in the collection, and I'm really excited. And actually in the ARC is the art, the interior art by Pole Arts, and it's just like, it's so good. It's so good. I'm so excited for this anthology. It was such a weird and amazing experience putting it together. It was truly like, I jokingly have referred to it as my Eras tour. I guess it's more like my Midnights. But it was really cool to kind of look at my work in retrospect and see how I put it together. And I hope you love the stories. I hope you are into the new stories because they're different. Like in my opinion, you'll know when you've hit a new story. It just feels different. And I'm really excited about them. A lot of times, I don't know that I'm like great at the short form because I'm not actually that short when I do short form. Like there's a novella in there that's very long, actually. It could have been a standalone novella, but I put it in JANUARIES because it felt like the right fit. And yeah, so I don't know how good I am at it, but I do love doing it. I love that you kind of get to just dip into this concept and this plot and live with these characters for just a little bit, and I don't necessarily have to explain the whole world to you, and you can just buy in. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about everything to come. I'm currently working, I wanted to give you a little update because it's not that often that there's like something very topical happening, but I do get a lot of questions about writer's block and how to continue when you feel like you're not doing, that something isn't good. And, you know, a lot of times my advice in that case is like, just keep going, just push through it. Like you never know how to end a book until you've ended a book, right? But at this point in my life and career, depending on who you are and your opinions about my books, I know how to end a book. And so I started writing Fire Season, which is my LA Gothic, my Hollywood Gothic. It's very heavily inspired by the Black Dahlia. And just sort of true crime in LA. And I just realized that the way that I initially built it, so this is something I sold, both a proposal and an existing like 30,000 words when I was writing it as a young adult novel. And then we kind of right away decided, let's not do this as a YA, let's do this as an adult. I can do something very different in the Gothic space for adults. And So I kind of did, I'm going to go ahead and say it's kind of a lazy thing where I took a lot of what I thought was good about the YA and tried to turn it into a new thing. And that didn't work. And so at the 25,000 word mark, I'm calling it, I got to start over. And it just everything was wrong, you know, and like it was just the character wasn't right, the inciting incident wasn't right. Why would she take this job? Like she just wasn't the right kind of desperate. The tone wasn't right. Just nothing was really coming together. And I sat there on Monday, just like, I'm stuck. I nothing is coming out that's good. I don't know what to do next. I'm really slowing down. I can feel myself running into a problem. And as I always say, I don't believe in writer's block as a phenomenon. I think that writer's block is a feeling that can happen, and it's like it's your instincts are telling you that something's not right behind you. And so I turned over my shoulder and looked at what I'd written and realized it wasn't good enough. And so I'm starting over. And there's no like advice here except that sometimes starting over is the right move. And that like I think sometimes you have to wait when you have that blocked feeling, you do have to like do something else for a little bit and you know, let it kind of marinate for a while. I don't start writing until I understand a character's voice. And I think that was part of the problem, was that I was not understanding. I wanted very badly, because it's a gothic, to feel like Rebecca. And you know, and I think Starling House is another example of a very good recent gothic, but I didn't want, you know, I can't do Alex E. Harrow's voice. That's not my voice. But my voice is also not Daphne du Maurier. And so I was just kind of thinking like, I gotta figure something else out. So I went back and I was reading, like I said, I was reading more about the Black Dahlia. I'm reading LA Confidential. I reread Joan Didion. I'm reading Eve Babbitt's. I really want this. I want to channel this. Like, I think when you're doing a gothic, and there's so many different like regional gothics, that I want to do something that is true to LA. Like there has to be a reason that I'm writing LA for the first time. And I don't normally like to world build. And in this case, I'm building like literally the world as it is. And there's so much about living in LA that I haven't put into words before. You probably know if you've read my books that I've written a lot about Chicago. I've written New York, but I have never written LA. And I wanted to be true to it. And I think I just built all this like expectation up of what the book was going to be. And I just have to start over. I think I understand now who the characters are. I know who at least one character is, so we'll figure it out. It was also kind of interesting debating whether to do this in first or third person. I think in the end I'm leaning first person, and that has nothing to do with like quality or preference. It's more like in the first person, because it's such a close perspective, you can do I don't know why it's giving me a thumbs up. You can do I wonder if it does it do the heart? Oh, it does! Yay! I just recently learned you could do that. I do it on FaceTime. Anyway, good Lord, what was I saying? So this book is called Fire Season, maybe. That's the working title. I haven't done a romance in a while. Oh, yes. So first person is very close. It's a very close perspective, such that you can, because you're looking so closely at one thing, it's kind of easier to do sleight of hand that way. I think it's why I do a lot of short stories in first person, because I'm focusing you on this one thing so that I can sort of surprise you with the other stuff outside of it. In short form, that's kind of easier to do. In short form, there's usually more of a plot twist. For me, again, this is all just how I specifically do things. And so that's what I think it will be. But we'll see. I always like to experiment with form. I don't know yet what is going to be weird about this particular form, but I hope that it will be, because I don't think I could do a straight up gothic. I don't think that's not really I don't think I would be interested in like a retelling situation. I'm only interested in how I can experiment with what exists. It's just that it's sort of the first time that I'm diving into a very existent canon, both in the sense of the LA novel and the Gothic novel. So I think I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety in that sense. I've already talked so much. I sat down and was like, what am I even going to talk about? And here we are. So let's talk about the Atlas Complex now. So skip all this if you haven't read the Atlas Complex. Please imagine that, like, you know, like I'm a chef and I've prepared this meal for you, and like the Atlas Complex is supposed to go last, and so if you haven't read it, you can't start with it, okay? Like, you're just gonna disrupt what I have, like, created specifically for your palate. It's important to me as the artist and the curator of this meal that you eat things in the right order, you experience things in the right way. So skip this if you haven't read the Atlas Complex. So I self-published this because I knew it was weird. It was weirder than it seemed at first glance. I knew that I was going to subvert certain fantasy archetypes. I was going to subvert the chosen one, and make it a corruption arc instead. Take someone who would in another book have been a hero and make them not a villain, because I don't think there are true villains. Like, the whole thing is that there are no heroes and no villains, but like a character who would have been driven to do good for kind of morally rigid reasons, just doesn't do good, and makes worse choices. And I knew that it was going to be so obsessed with the inside of the characters' heads and their relationships, to the point where the outside plot is almost not relevant. There's a reason that we were really zooming out so that I could show you the world later, to recontextualize all the things that I showed you in the beginning. But I think that dark academia happening just as the rise of, you know, romantasy was happening, was maybe detrimental to the expectations for the Atlas Six as a series. The problem with traditional publishing is that it's traditional publishing's job to sell every book as if it's for everyone, as if everyone will love it. You're obviously trying to cast the widest net because it's a profit-driven industry. And I knew this book wasn't necessarily for everyone, and I think what is unfortunate is that romantasy kind of created this expectation of romance. And romance pacing and romance character arcs, and like, it was just never going to be that. I am not a romantasy author. I don't write romantic fantasy. I write slutty fantasy. And that is different. I write hedonistic fantasy, maybe, sometimes. But for me, this series was always about ethics, and it was not about romance. And I also was looking at it as like, this is just a sliver of these characters' lives. I'm not really concerned about their happily ever afters. I'm not concerned with their endings as people. I'm concerned with how do these themes resolve. And my themes were about ethics and the difference between power and exploitation, and whether there is a difference between power and exploitation. The themes of these books are really just right on the cover for you. The knowledge is carnage, destiny is a choice, power is taken. And I meant institutional power is taken from someone. This is not a, you know, I make the joke that this is not a girl boss narrative, but it really is not. It is about how to exist ethically in a scenario where it's impossible to be ethical, which is, you know, in its way, a comment on capitalism and such. And I really wanted to sort of, on the page, rail against this American exceptionalism, conservative feminism, this very like individualistic way of seeing the world as like having to, as power is something that's like up for grabs that you have to take for yourself. I really wanted to write about the collective human and what our responsibility is to each other. And ultimately it ends up, you know, one of the things that I set up throughout the books was this tension between the idea of determinism and existentialism, and how to live well, just how to live and how to make the next right choice. And so obviously someone has to make wrong choices in order for that to happen. So the ways that I approach that, in book one, it was with the Median whose talent is essentially life, and they bring up this idea, Dalton brings up this idea of like, what is inevitable? Is there a blueprint? Is everyone who is gifted with life destined in some way for death, in this cosmic irony kind of way? It's how much do we understand about cause and effect? And then in book two, there's the argument between the two physicists that Libby is only half paying attention to about the many worlds concept, and the idea that like, what matters? If there is a multiverse and everything, all these different, you are making every single choice at any given moment and it's just playing out as is, then what agency do we actually have? Are we autonomous at all? In a world where all outcomes are equally real and equally meaningful, then what really matters? And that's why I bring it back to the subject of choice. And that's why I also knew that we were going to actually engage with the existence of the multiverse. And that's why I knew there was going to be that scene at the end where we would see glimpses. I knew it wasn't going to be like an across the Spider-Verse kind of thing. We weren't going to multiverse hop, but we were going to understand that because the multiverse exists, all these different outcomes are possible. And so what does that mean? How does that recontextualize the way that we live now in our reality? What does reality even mean? All of this kind of revolves around Tristan, who, like, if you had to, like, the character who has the closest thing to a hero's journey is Tristan. Maybe Paresa also. I think Paresa's message, like, I think there are many ways to read these books. And one is a sort of, like, on the top, like, Paresa's story has a lot to do with, like, I don't want to call it a mental illness narrative because it isn't. But certainly if you are mentally ill, there's something about Paresa's message about that you don't have to earn life, that it is worthy enough to want to live, to try to live. That's kind of that, like, universal message. And then sort of underneath that, the structural, like, let's look at the system and the ways that it's not serving us. I actually knew the ending. I knew Raina's ending the whole time. Because it's this very silly thing. If you're an astrology girly, you know that, like, Pluto was in Capricorn. There was a period in my life, you know, if you've followed me for a while, when I didn't know if I was doing the right thing trying to be a writer. And so every time I did a tarot reading or a palm reading or whatever for fun, I would always ask, am I on the right path? And so this tarot reader did a past, present, future reading for me. And for the future, I pulled the Sun card. And the Sun card is kind of like your passion. It's what drives you. And I didn't tell her what exactly that was, but to her, it was confirmation that I should keep writing. And her reasoning was that as Pluto moves into Aquarius, all of our systems were going to change. They're going to be overhauled. I think you can actually see that happening. There's a real difference in attitude and, like, I think the sort of labor revolution that's happening with strikes and etc. I hope that it's true that we're gonna rebuild and we're gonna have these new structures. And what the tarot reader told me was that when that happens, we need people who have followed their passions, because those are going to be the people who have the endurance to help us get where we need to go. And I just thought, that's Raina. And so that was something, you know, I loved this idea of, you know, we're focusing on these relationships and how pulpy they are, because I wanted to show you that, like, the people who make the biggest impact on you are not necessarily love stories. They're not always good stories, and the happy ending is not the most important part. But I also don't want to glorify death. I told you that someone was going to die from book one. I knew it was going to happen, and I knew it was going to hurt. It should hurt, because I didn't want it to be this empty death that we can get rid of someone who is not relevant to the narrative or doesn't mean anything to the audience. I built these 6 characters so that you would really feel it when one of them was gone. And I'm not the one who committed that murder. A character did it. And she did it for a reason, and that is sort of the significance of her corruption arc. That's part of the art that I'll leave for you. But I think that moment is very important because it is a choice, and it is juxtaposed shortly after with Gideon making a very different choice. And hopefully that means something to you, because I put it there so that it would. But anyway, the reason that I wrote the multiverse scene is because it's twofold. It's one, because I wanted to do the whole existentialism thing, whatever, you get it. The other thing is because I come from fandom, and I believe in happy endings, and I believe in all outcomes being equally real. I believe in fix. It's just that the story that I was telling and the thing that I was trying to say about ethics only resolved one way. It had to be that ending. It's a sort of doomed by the narrative thing. I think in fantasy there's a lot of, like, estimation of worthiness, that, like, a sacrifice is always, like, magic comes from worth. But in fandom, every outcome exists all at once. And if what was important to you, if your takeaway was a romance between 2 characters, then you can fix it. In your imagination, you can tell me which reality is real. You can tell me which reality we're in, and that's fine. I got to tell you my version of the story, but I also made it so that every other version of the story is canon as well. And to me, that's not a cop-out, that's a gift. Being someone who wrote a non-canon ship for years of my life, to me, that's a present. That's like, go for it. If this is the relationship, if to you the story was a romance the whole time, then I have given you a reality where it was a romance the whole time. But I am also the creator. So R.F. Kuang and I had a really interesting discussion about the sort of spectrum of auteur, where what the author says matters, and the collaborative that like everyone contributes to the story. And Rebecca's answer was that she sees herself closer to the auteur. But for me, it felt hypocritical to be that way. It felt hypocritical not to like take the audience's hand and say what you're seeing is real. It's not everything. It's not the only interpretation. What I put there for you to find also matters. The story is not singularly what I wrote, just as it's not singularly what you interpret. The story is communion between you and me, the author and the audience, and the writer and the reader, that we kind of are coming together with the interpretation. You will, of course, walk away with whatever you walk away with. And there are the things that I put there for you to find, whether you unearth them or not. But I think, to me, that is what's really beautiful, is that both of those things can and should coexist. And it was exciting for me to create with this backdrop of the collective imagination, with this idea that like everything is true, that this story is ours, that it came from this experience that we had together. I mean, there's just something that I hope you find as beautiful as I do, even though I know it's controversial. I know that not everybody can see what I was trying to do. And I think I just have to accept as a creator that that's okay. I took the risks I needed to take. I'm proud of what I wrote. I'm really proud of what I wrote. It was not easy. And every word is there for a reason. And it's all like, we could have an hour long or more conversation about why things were the way they were. I will just say one more thing, which is that this is not, like, there is meant to be ambiguity in the ending, that there is a character, it's like, that is alive, who maybe you didn't expect to be alive, but he is definitely alive, okay? The intended ambiguity is not, is he alive or dead? But now that we know that all realities are possible, now that we know what love can look like in all these different forms, with all these different choices, then where are we in the end, between these two definitely living people? Okay, well, I guess that's enough for me. Yeah. I have a busy spring, but hopefully I'll be back. I don't think I've gotten any like requests for advice recently, but if you have any, I promise I won't take so long. I will answer you. Okay, last thing I'm going to say is One for My Enemy is now available in paperback, US, UK. Also, I don't know if I've never shown you this, but this is my actual tattoo. My son thinks it's so cute. This has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next time.